favorite mediums, and that is oil pastels and soft pastels. And you can just see Franz, he has this amazing picture that he's going to help teach us all how to create. So if you have any questions throughout the class, just chat them in the group chat to me, ask me questions, and I will get you your answers. We'll talk with Franz that way, and let's get started. On to you, Franz.
Okay, well, I'm really excited about doing this workshop, and I was discussing with folks earlier that I haven't really done pastels for quite some time, and then when they asked if I would like to do this, I agreed because I thought, well, this might be a good time to revisit pastels. And I got started, years after the last time I did one, and I can't quit. I mean, every time I wake up in the morning, I think I want to do one more. So this has been really exciting to me. And so with that kind of energy I have in my own work, I want to share it with you. Now, this is like for beginners. I mean, even if you're advanced, whatever, there may be lots of stuff that, from my point of view, it'll help give you a couple tips too. But I kind of want to take things step by step, and then we will kind of get to a point where I'll show you several ideas about doing a drawing. So I don't know if everybody has their own pastels at home or whether you're just watching. It doesn't make any difference. So what I want to do first is kind of talk about pastels and themselves. And generally they're two different types. They're the oil pastels, they have an oil base to them. And then they have the soft pastels, which are much more kind of chalky, and they don't have the same kind of viscous binder in them. So they each exhibit different qualities, and we're going to talk about that. And then the second thing that a lot of time is ignored is the paper. I mean, a lot of times, especially when you first get started, you just kind of think, okay, well, paper's paper, and you maybe draw some, something a little bit better than copy paper. But the paper can really be an ally to what you're trying to do. And there's several different types of paper, and you'll get different results with each of those different types of paper. So I want to cover that a little bit too. So to begin with, this is my monkey. It's my model up here. What I've started to do is go through my collection of what I consider to be oddball things, little, kind of ceramic things that were made in the 30s, or in this case, a mechanical monkey. And what I did, I actually did it on two different pieces of paper to kind of compare and contrast oil pastels and soft pastels. So the oil pastels are on this side and the soft pastels are on the other. And I just wanted to kind of experiment to see what type of effects I could get with each one of them. And I found that once I got the oil, I did the left-hand side first, and I got the oil pastel done. I found that I could cover up a little bit easier what I had underneath because of the viscous, the viscosity of the oil. And then when I got over to the soft pastel, I found that I could get really intense colors, and I could get a little easier blending. And so those are the kind of things that you have to decide, what kind of work you want to do. If you're going to do a bunch of work that is going to be a lot of blending, then maybe you'll want to go with the oil pastel or the soft pastel, all this. So what that got me to think about was that the way that I have really improved my own work is just by experimenting. And that's why I want to call this monkeying around. All right. So the best thing that you can do is to spend a lot of time practicing. And you don't always have to do a finished drawing. You can take scrap paper, which we will be doing. I'll kind of give you a couple little ideas of what to play with. And then we'll get on to maybe kind of how you can apply those things to a complete drawing. Now, beside the pastel and the paper, those are two major things, but also you have to think about the tools that kind of come in handy. And I found the best tool is like your hand. You're going to be holding the pastels. You're going to figure out how to apply them. But a lot of blending, I will admit to being one of those people that uses my fingers to blend a lot. Now, there are other things that you can use. You can use a chamois. This one out obviously has been used a lot, but it's just, real thin, real nice, soft piece of hide. And these can be washed. And these are good for blending. You also have these paper stomps, also known as tortillons. And you can get them in different sizes, so you can use these to blend colors together or push color a little bit into certain places. You'll notice that I have blue painter's tape. It's a low-tack paint, and I like to tape those so that as I'm moving the pastel over the surface, when I'm done, I can take that piece of blue tape off and I have a real nice crisp edge. Now, let's see, what else do I have? Baby wipes and a towel. You'll find that if you go to blend, let's say like in this yellow, I wanted to blend that together with my finger. If I don't clean my finger off, then whatever color I blend over here suddenly appears, and then you've got to work on repairing that or figure out some way to kind of rework that. So kneaded erasers, the classic is this kind of gray, and it is called a kneaded eraser because that's what you do. When you get the surface full of pigment, then you just keep on working it. And the traditional color is this gray, but Faber-Castell makes some red and blue and yellow, and they're excellent. These are excellent. I just like the color. You know, the color is a lot more fun. These kneaded erasers are a little bit sticky, which is kind of the function of it, because I'll show you how you can use these to remove layers of the soft pastel, not so much the oil pastel, but with the soft pastel, it's a good way to kind of cut back some of your layers without disturbing the rest of the drawing. So we'll go over that. A sandpaper pencil sharpening pad is good because if you're trying to work with the soft pastels and you want a sharp edge, and if you just kind of rub it on the sandpaper, you can get a real nice crisp edge they can use to put in some detail. Pencil for sketching, and then a vinyl eraser, which is really good for doing some major cleanup of edges, and we'll get into that as well. Okay, so we're going to remove the monkey. And then I'm going to tape a couple of different pieces of paper up. This is a paper that is slightly textured, and the general rule of thumb has always been with pastels that you generally want a textured paper. And the advantage of using a textured paper is that that texture will help hold the pigment, and especially with the soft pastels. You'll find out as I demo here that the soft pastels are like dust, and they don't stick the same way that the oil pastels will stick. Okay, so first let's go to the oil pastels.
So Franz, can our friends use regular printer paper? Will that work?
Oh yeah, yeah. You know, oh, you mean
if they don't have textured paper?
Oh, when I was thinking about printer paper, I was thinking of like intaglio and silkscreen and stuff like that. Now, you really want to get a paper that is fairly heavy, and it can be smooth, because I'll show you an example of kind of the difference between using a smooth paper and a textured paper. But you want a heavier paper, and if you can get something that is like a 100% rag or something like that, it's like anything else. The better the materials, the better chance you have of succeeding. You don't want to fight the paper. So if you use copy paper, you know, out of a printer or something, I mean, yeah, you can make marks and you can do all stuff, but you'll find that it's a little bit more frustrating, especially if you use the soft pastels, and that it's a much nicer experience if you get a better grade paper. So even just like, you know, a tablet of drawing paper or something like that will work well. And the best, I think, is the paper that is, I mean, the paper that I use is 100% rag. Now, when you're first beginning and you know that you're going to make mistakes and all that, then that's when you could get like an all media, you know, like a recycled paper or something like that. But you definitely want something that's a little bit heavier, because you're apt to maybe rub and scrape and erase. And so you want a paper that's strong enough and is flexible enough that will be able to take the abuse that you're going to be engaged in and trying to get your image. Okay. So what
Thank you, Franz. That's perfect. So everyone, just to kind of recap, just using a textured paper, you know, whether that's a mixed media paper, or we have a friend asking if they can use a canvas. I think that would work.
Yeah, you could use canvas. You know, I mean, you know, essentially you could do anything you want, but you
Yeah,
know,
watercolor paper.
to get the best thing, yeah, watercolor paper. Now, and that's kind of the point. I'm going to put another piece of paper up here. This is a much smoother paper, and I've got right up here, I've got a textured paper. This is a specific pastel paper. And then this is a paper that has what's called the Sandpaper Surface on it. And they coat this with something. So if you close your eyes and run your fingers over it, it actually feels like a real fine grit sandpaper. And so that obviously is really going to allow you to build a lot of stuff up. All right, so what maybe we'll do on each piece of paper, this is the textured, this is the smoother, and this is that sandpaper. So I'm going to just arbitrarily take a color that will probably show up a little bit better. And I'm going to just make a couple of marks, some strokes. Oh, and the other thing too, like when I was in elementary school, to begin this the school year, you'd go to school with, you know, your brand new set of crayons. And I had this art teacher that would come around and purposely break your crayon because they wanted you to use the side and stuff. As a kid, that was a horrible thing. I was just so crestful. I like beautiful crayons, but as an adult, I understand what he was going for. These oil pastels, these are Faber-Castell Oil Pastels. The oil pastels are round, and that's the other thing, the shape that I didn't mention. The soft pastels quite often are like a square. The cross section is square. The oil pastels are round. It doesn't mean that you can't find, you know, round soft pastels and square oil pastels. It's just that the ones that I'm using are that. It kind of makes it a little bit easier to tell them apart. But, you know, as nice as they look in the set and with the labels, you want to peel part of the label away, if not all of it, because one of the advantages of either one of these things, you can use it to make marks on the edge. If I kind of roll along, I can make a line. If I press down and use the whole crayon surface, I get a wider line. And then if I want to build up surfaces, I can use the edge. Okay, so you can see with the rough paper, at least the theory is, if you can't see, I don't know what the detail is on our cameras here, but you kind of see that as you run it across, and I'm using moderate pressure, you still get part of the grain of the paper that is coming through. So you've got the green on the top, but then you also have pattern of the texture of the paper that is down below. You've only kind of, now if I want to get rid of some of that, then if I press a little bit harder, then not only am I depositing the pastel on the top, but I'm also forcing it down into the valleys. Now at this point, maybe we can talk about then using your finger, or you could use the paper stomp or something, and I can start moving that around. And so I can start developing, you know, with one crayon or one pastel here. If I lighten up the texture a little bit, or the pressure, so I go from something that is completely saturated, and then I lighten up a little bit. And so then when I kind of blend these together, I start getting different values of the same color. Now, again, because this is so textured, then it's going to be, I'll have to work at it a little bit more. I'll have to put some more down, and then I can fix some more up and move it around. Now,
So
if
Franz,
I want
we have some friends asking if we're going to draw the monkey today.
No, we're not going to draw the monkey today. We're going to draw a ceramic sugar bowl, which we will get to soon. Yeah, I think that, you know, the monkey took me about a week to get done. So I was kind of thinking, well, what would be the most effective thing to do? But especially as beginners, the first thing you should do is monkey around. You know, try these different techniques out that I'll be showing you. they're going to be like your arsenal to kind of build up and accumulate so that you can do what it is that you want. And that's the other thing too, is that, you can do abstract things, you can do caricatures, you can do realistic things like the stuff that I've been doing. It's a matter of you finding out for yourself what it is that you want to do. So if you aren't interested in doing something that is, realistic, maybe you want to do something that's more expressionistic. It also depends, like, I'm doing these essentially eccentric still lifes, but you could do portraits, you could go out and do the landscape, and either category, any of those categories is something that you can do. But the main thing is to find out what is it that you want to do. So by kind of monkeying around here, practicing a little bit, trying some different techniques out, that'll get you started. And then we'll go into something, I'll show you the way to lay a drawing out and the kind of order to start doing things. Now, generally what you do is you put a mid-tone to a darker color down first, and then you add lights and you add blacks. Now, as far as blending, I go from kind of this blue. I've already blended the green a little bit. You can use paper towel. And so just with a little bit of pressure, start moving the pastel around, and you can start getting a nice blend. Now the oil pastels, because they are more viscous, they're a little bit harder to blend. So as you work back and forth, again, you usually go from a high concentration and a darker color into the lighter color. And then I can put a few little bits of the green here now, and some in through here. So if you have your pastel sets with you, you can be doing the same thing. Start experimenting, seeing how you put the colors down and how you can blend them. Now in a minute we'll get to the soft pastels because it's a little bit different. You move them around. Now some people like using, if you get to a certain point and you are working with a heavier grade paper, or the person that had said something about working on canvas, you can use linseed oil or a little bit of mineral oil, and you can add a little bit of that and you can get a blend. The problem with that though is if you're working with paper, the oil will actually get in the paper a little bit, and farther down the road that may be some problems. So I have a tendency not to use anything other than the pastels and then blend them with the stomps or my fingers or something like that. All right, now once I have that on top, if I want to alter that color a little bit, then I can again take the lighter color and then apply it. And so if I want to really kind of perk that green up, I can add, and then if I choose to, I can blend it off there. Now, when we actually get into doing a drawing, the idea is to put base colors down first and then start to add the details. So you go from the general to the specific. All right, so let's get kind of an equivalent color thing going with the soft pastels. And you can even hear just the difference in the sound. This almost sounds like I am kind of taking these things and scraping it on sandpaper. I'll come over here. So the layering with the oil pastels, as you'll discover as you experiment for yourself, is a lot different than the feeling of layering with the soft pastels. The soft pastels, once they're on the paper, is almost like dust, and you're trying to control how that's going to stay on and how you can blend colors. But with very little effort, I can, because the pigment isn't attached to the paper the same way that the oil pastels are. So this is a little more fragile. So you just have to be just a little bit more careful about how you move things around. Now, if I put my hand on here and take it off, it generally will not affect the oil pastel. But if I do it, with the soft pastel, then you can see that quite a bit is kind of popping off the surface. All right, now, as far as layering, you can now start to, if I want to, I could work with another color on top of that. And if I use a little bit of light pressure, I'll get a certain amount. But then if I use a bit more pressure, I can definitely make that mark. Now, you'll have a little bit of influence by the color underneath it, but that's part of it. When you lay it out, you want to anticipate what's going to go on top of it. All right, if I want to, I can kind of smooth that out. So these are the type of things. Now, if you get to a point where you decide, oh, that was a mistake, that's where the kneaded eraser comes in handy with the soft pastels. Less apt to have that happen with oil pastels, but I can press into that. And so I can actually remove the layering of the soft pastel so that if I want this to be a little bit brighter and a little bit truer, it's because I don't have as much pigment underneath. And so it gives a chance for the true color of that to be very intense as it comes around. So you can use that, to create space and effects and textures, depending on what it is that you're trying to do. So, I can come back and then put another layer on, or if you want to have something that is even more controlled, let's say you have a highlight that you want to put in there, you can mold your eraser, and then I can come back and I can put, smaller dots and repetitive dots and start kind of clearing an area out. And then with the kneaded eraser to get rid of that on the surface, then you move it around. All right, and so I can pick up enough off of that when I put a white on there, it's going to be much more like a nice bright white highlight. If I did that over here where it's a little bit more, you can see that it's, the color comes through there a little bit more. So you can use that to your advantage, because a lot of times if you're looking at the highlight of something, depending on how reflective the surface is, it'll be a really bright white, or it might be a slight gray or something like that. So you can use these different techniques in order to kind of simulate that. Okay, so quickly what I want to do is come over now. This is the paper. This is the textured paper. To take advantage of this again, if I come back and I guess that was the oil pastel. So if I lightly go over that, I'm getting a little bit of I put a little bit of pressure on it, so I'm getting a little bit of a blue to start filling in those white textures. And then as I come out, maybe it'll be a little bit lighter. So you can take advantage of that texture to simulate some kind of a texture or some kind of effect you might want in your drawing. Okay, so this is the sandpaper surface. And as I draw this down, I can tell that there's like just enough friction to it that as I'm drawing, it definitely feels like it's sticking. And since I've been smearing that and smearing that, the other thing that is good to have handy are baby wipes, so I can clean my fingers off, or I could use one of my paper stomps to blend. We'll do that. Not bad idea to clean those occasionally. Okay, so there's so much pastel on this, I kind of feel like that. Let me get my hands all totally clean, but it's a very interesting surface to work on. It's a lot different than paper, so I'll go over that again with this to kind of. All right, so you can start seeing the little bits of the oil there, and then I can go on top of it with another color. So with the oil pastel, you can build up much juicier, thicker layers. And I think that, in a lot of kind of expressionistic work, especially with landscape, something like that, somebody who can kind of master keeping the strokes without having to always blend everything, it really creates a really nice effect. So that's yet another way of working with them. All right, to blend the colors, maybe, you can not, I'm working with a set of 36 and 24 oil pastel colors and 36 of the soft pastels. So sometimes I don't have the color I want. So you can, there's another thing to practice is kind of like the pointillist trick of putting light dots of color, and then when you blend those together, then you can come up with a color that might be a little bit closer to what you want. So if I put even more concentrations of this orangey color down, and up here maybe a little bit more pink, then when I go to blend those together, then we'll have a different appearance. And then, I could keep on layering and layering and layering and layering until I get the color or the effect that I want. Now, the one thing that you can do with the oil pastels, if you've decided that you just have too much down there and you want to remove some of it, this is an old dental tool. You could use an X-Acto knife or something like that. And then you can come in and actually scrape away. You can hear that texture from the paper. And this also could be a technique as well, that if I'm coming across here, it's almost like adding a lighter value by scraping away what's on the top. And I think, essentially continue doing this. I'm just playing around here. I'm just saying, okay, well, what happens if you do this? What happens if you do that? So I'm hoping that, I can kind of help direct you into discovering what's going to work for you and which techniques make the most sense. Okay, let's go to the soft pastels on the sandpaper paper. And it really is just the tactile sensation is just really smooth. I mean, you would think kind of with sandpaper it would be the opposite, but there's no resistance because the grain of the paper is kind of cutting through the softness of the pastel. So we'll put a couple of strokes there, and then I'm going to build it up with another layer. And this definitely is absorbing a lot of the pigment. I mean, that is just really intense. I don't know if it shows up on the video or not, but let's take a little more color and put it on top. And then, kind of holds a line as well.
We have a friend asking if you're using the point or are you using the side to get that really vibrant color?
Okay, for that line, I kind of, let's see if I can find what I haven't used yet. Okay, so I've got the corner of this one. I'll peel a little of the paper away. Okay, so right on the corner, if I orient the pastel that way, I can get lines. So essentially what I'm doing is just going on the corner, and you kind of see the way that that has kind of chamfered that down. Now, if I want a thicker line, and if I hold it against the whole edge, then I get a thicker line. And then, of course, if I have the paper off, let's see if I have one, there we go. And then this way, I can use the whole side. And I really like that kind of speckly effect there. So we can, let's see, what would happen if we put another color on top of it. Okay, so it acts as a very transparent. This really is a very nice surface because it really, really holds the pigment. The soft pastels, as you experiment on other papers that may not have the same texture, a lot of that kind of dust could possibly be rubbed away, but this is really holding it very nicely. And you can come through, play, experiment, see what you can get on your own. But I mean, that in itself is a very nice effect. Kind of rubbing that top color away, and it kind of is going out. And it's almost like kind of this luminescent effect And you've got this really nice kind of texture that comes through there. Then you can use your erasers as a drawing tool. And again, what I recommend doing is like taking a cloth or having the baby wipe handy so you can clean your art erasers. But if I want to, now I can just put a lot of pressure and go on the edge of this thing. And so I can actually draw with the eraser by removing. And on this paper, there's just enough of a stain there to kind of, but you can get all sorts of effects by doing this. If you use a little less pressure. So, you know, in reference to maybe you're doing an image rather something that is a little more experimental and freeform, you might, on paper like this, then you definitely could get back down to an area that if you wanted to put a highlight there, then it's really going to show up.
That's great, Franz. Should we start drawing the sugar bowl?
Yes. Okay, yes, we can do that. And then this is like kind of the smooth paper. One thing I wanted to show you, rather than maybe doing the exercise, and again, I really encourage you to get your pastels, your paper together, get whatever you feel you need, and really just experiment, because the more you work on this stuff, the more hours you put in, the more familiar you become with what is possible. And then you can go. All right, so this is an example of, I don't know how much of the detail will show up on the camera. Okay, so anyhow, this one was done on a very smooth paper. And the reason I did it on that was that I was trying to get the feeling of a real slick surface with really bright highlights. So it's, you know, kind of white porcelain or whatever, you know, the slip is that they used on this. And so I wanted things to be very glossy looking, and I was able to blend things together and put the highlights on the really soft or the really smooth paper in order to do that. It's a little more difficult to keep the pigment in place. You have to be a little more careful with it, but I got that. And then this is an example of a more textured paper. And so this is the creamer that will go with our blow up of the sugar bowl, which you'll see in a minute. And it's, yeah, here we are. Yeah, it's getting there. You can see it's more painterly. You can see that it isn't quite as smooth a surface. A little bit of the texture paper of the paper is coming through. So it's just a difference. I mean, you want something that looks a little more almost photographic and smooth and, you know, really bright, or something that looks a little bit more painterly. And then this one is a moderate. It has a little bit of texture, but it also is a little bit smoother. This is a very strange Popeye that I saw. It's a cast iron Popeye. And especially what I wanted to do is maybe show the base of it. So I was able to take advantage of the texture of the paper to make it that part of the cast iron that is a little bit rougher. I was able to get a texture playing with the paper that I wouldn't have been able to get if I were using the smooth paper, but with it being a little less textured, I still was able to get, you know, like kind of the enamel paint that was very shiny. So again, a lot of your decisions on the paper and how you're going to approach things are going to be depending on what it is that you want to do. And that, yeah, I can't emphasize it enough. You know, keep practicing, experiment, and then try to find subject matter or some way of expressing yourself that is really true to you, rather than thinking, oh, well, you know, most artists do bananas, so I'll do a banana. There's nothing wrong with doing bananas, but, you know, there might be something that you get more excited about. Okay, what I did, since I knew that we were going to be kind of working on a camera without tremendous detail, this is our subject. And I generally kind of like working from life, but I will take photographs, and I'll have small photographs that I can use to reference. So then that way I can kind of see the object, sketch it out, start drawing with it, and then there may be something in the photograph that is catching like the color. This isn't set quite the way that I had the light when I took the photograph, but you can see that it's a white porcelain. But down in here, because I had it up against the blue background, that white is reflecting a lot of the blue. And those are the type of things that I look for, because I think that's what makes the drawing very interesting. So as I'm working from life, I see in the photograph that perhaps that's a little more of a intensity than you would normally see. And I kind of like going back and forth between what I'm observing and what I observe in a photograph. So what I generally do is sketch out the main parts just as kind of a guide. I might indicate a little bit where the highlights are, because even though I know I can erase this stuff, I still want to kind of keep that to be raw paper, and then I'll enhance it. So I have a piece of textured paper, there's a piece of smooth paper, and I wanted to touch a little bit on working on a tinted paper as well. And so I thought we'll get started here. So using this as a reference and looking at the duck itself, let's start on the beak. And so I'm going to take a soft pastel. And what I do is I usually lay in the base colors right to begin with. Okay, now I can decide whether I want to keep that texture or not. And in this case, I want to kind of, since this is more of a smoother thing, I'm going to go back with a clean finger and block that in. Okay, I'm getting a little bit of it come down here. This is a little bit darker. It's got a little bit of a highlight, but I will put just a little bit down here. So I've got that kind of blocked in. Okay, now let's go to that kind of head there, which is the orange. Okay, so as I'm going across there, you can kind of see that texture of the paper. And there are ways that I can take advantage of that. Now over here, I've switched on to the smooth paper. So you can see it's a different effect, because there's not that much texture. Then I'm able to get a smoother application. Again, if I decide to kind of start working it in.
Franz, we have a friend asking, when you're using foam blenders, is there a way to clean them so that you can use other colors with them?
I'm sorry, the foam blenders?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can take a baby wipe and clean it, because most of this foam, I mean, it depends on how porous it is. I mean, the ones that I'm thinking about are the ones that are a more solid, heavier constitution. So just have baby wipes. I mean, I use baby wipes for everything but babies. So if I want to then go back and blend the green, I can just clean my hands off. I'm all set. I can use this, but with those blenders, I mean, you should be able to just kind of take it right off. The oil pastels might cling a little bit more, but I don't imagine there'd be any trouble removing the stuff from that. Okay, let's go back to the eyeball now. Kind of come in, and again, the first thing I do is just kind of start blending. Not blending, but laying in the primary colors I'm going to be using. Every once in a while, I'll pick up a little bit of some other color. I can get that out. I know that I'll be able to kind of correct for that. And what's really important is to, even though in my head it's okay, this is kind of an orange color, but then when you see as it has less light, it becomes a little bit more red-orange, and then kind of this cerise color. And then the shadow is not black, it's more of kind of maroon color. And then because this is so shiny, think about where the light's coming from. The light's coming from this direction. No, I'm sorry, from this direction, so you get some highlights, but everything that's behind here is darker. But then a lot of times on a spherical shape, you'll get a little bit of reflected light. And so instead of making this just an entirely solid color, which would be very graphic, I like picking on things like the highlight and the shadow and in through here. This is like a color that I normally wouldn't associate with that, but that's the way it happens with the light. In this case, it's a little bit different because the light's coming from here. I don't know if I can. So, all right, let's continue here. So I'll keep on blocking this in. It's a little bit lighter up and through here. So if I want to start working on, so I'm working right on top of it. And you know, every time that you're working, you don't necessarily have to get your finger in there to blend. Okay, so I'm going to move over to, now in the set that I have, I don't really have kind of like this maroonish color. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of purple and very sparingly put that in. And then over on top of that, I'm going to put this kind of reddish color. And again, instead of using a point, I'm using the side because I'm dealing with a surface. And the other thing too, that as I'm working on putting that on top, I'm following the shape. This is a curved, it isn't a flat shape, so I'm not going back and forth. I'm trying to kind of follow in the direction of the surface. And so I'm going to bring that, and it kind of comes around here like that. Now in this case, I am going to blend it together a little bit. So I didn't have that kind of maroonish color, but I'm coming close to having something that is close to it by blending this color. So that's kind of coming down a little bit more. And like as I'm running my finger over there, I'm thinking of it as being this kind of spherical shape. So I'm.
Franz, sorry to interrupt, but it looks like your phone has turned off. Could you see if you can't turn it back on?
Yes.
There we go. That's perfect.
Okay, good.
Can you move up the picture a little bit? We're having a couple friends ask to see the whole duck. They're not able to see it. Like,
you want that up?
If you move your camera up a little.
Oh, okay, yeah. Hold on. Got kind of a. Okay. How's that?
That's great, Franz.
Okay, and then I'll kind of turn him around so you can see a little better what the model looks like. Okay, so I've come back and now I'm going to go over that again. So you can see the way that I'm starting to get some volume built by layering on top. Now, of course, that isn't nearly dark enough. So I might come back with a darker purple. And that's the other thing too, I found that in the beginning, I was very timid about these darker values. Because it really, you start having things look kind of nice and then you think, oh man, I can't imagine putting something dark. But once you get it all together, it's amazing how something that you feel is rash and rather bold is just the perfect thing to be doing. Okay, I'm not going to mess with this too much. Okay, now coming into here, again, there's that point. It actually looks like it's almost a bright white right up in here. Okay, I don't have this down quite. That's the other thing too, that if I look at where that starts almost right here. And it's very thin, so it gives me an idea that I have got to, where's my purple? I want to kind of make this dark up at the top. There we go, that's a little better. And it comes down here, and then it swoops over about that point. All right, so we'll go with that for now. And I found that I generally work on the object first, and then I start working on the background as the very last thing. Because, as an example, up here, if that isn't this real nice curve, and I can take my vinyl eraser, and I'm really pressing down on it, and then I can use the edge to clean the edge of the eraser. And that really sharpens that edge, which is going to be the thing that makes it pop off the background when I go to. Now with the oil pastels, it's not a bad idea, like, as you're kind of working with an oil pastel, you get these little shards, and you can brush them away with a soft brush like this. With a soft pastel, you have to be a little more careful, because as I drag it across there, that's going to actually get more of it to drag into the non-image area. But for the oil pastels, it's pretty indispensable. All right, so this is where we get the white. So I'm going to establish that. And then I'm going to get a little of this float over here. And then if you really look at it, there's just a bit of orange. You're getting a little bit of the orange that's coming through here. So I'm going to very lightly put that in. I'll come back and get that highlight in a minute. Okay, we're getting there. And then I start going back and forth, right? Let me work on this a little bit more here. Kind of neglecting the front of the head a bit. Now, before I start, kind of putting my finger in that again, I want to clean it because I've got dark purple on it. So I can lightly move that around. Okay, so to make this a little more intense in here. Okay, now after I've done that, get my eraser, and it's my kneaded eraser, and I'm going to kind of pick up about where that highlight is. Take my other one and kind of clean that edge up. Okay. I'll take the white, and I'll make a really bright highlight here. And then it goes from being thin, and it starts getting a little thinner. Now I'm going to apply it very lightly, because this is just a little bit of a kind of reflected light.
So we have a friend asking if you normally work vertically on a surface like this, or do you normally do it sitting down?
Well, I usually work sitting down, but I thought for this demo, it would be a lot easier to video it being vertical. So when I did that last Popeye one, I was trying it out, and I actually kind of like working vertically. The one disadvantage of working vertically is that there are certain places that are a little awkward to work. So what I do, I normally don't have a big photograph here. I did this just mainly for the class, but I've applied this blue tape to the paper and then kind of affixed the paper to the board. So if I'm ever at a point, usually it comes when I'm doing the background. If I find that I really can't get the right angle, I'll actually very carefully take the paper off, but not the tape that defines the format, and I can move it and then retape it. And then as I'm working around it, I could twirl this thing 360 degrees as I'm working. So I actually have found that I kind of enjoy working standing up better than sitting down. But that's a recent development for me. Okay, so then this kind of light color comes across here. So you can kind of see now, so I've lost a little bit of the darkness here. So I can come back with more purple, make that a little bit darker. And at some point, I kind of wait a while before I start getting the black out. I kind of like trying to build the darks up by layering colors. Now I do have a dark gray that is almost like black. It isn't quite. And so if I really want to start bringing up the contrast, and so the contrast is something that will really pop the shapes out. And again, it's just something that you get used to as you continue to work. Okay, so you can see the way it's starting to glow a little bit. Let's work on putting it. All right, now up and through here, I've got kind of a highlight, and it looks a little bit kind of textured. So if I work on getting things solid in the center, and then as I come over like this on the textured paper, then I can take advantage of you know, kind of simulating that feel of kind of a highlight. Not a bright white highlight, but there's a little bit of a texture. And then as I bring it across, then I can keep it nice and solid over in these areas. Okay, let's continue. All right, with the green. Okay, again, I don't have maybe the specific green I need, so I can take another one. This is kind of a bluish green, which is kind of close to that color. And then I can kind of start working on this. And this is the textured paper, so I'm putting in this very lightly and kind of blocking in where that kind of darker color gets. One thing that's kind of fun about working with the sandpaper paper and the texture is I like the sound it makes. Okay, then I've got kind of a lighter green. I think what I'll do instead is take a little bit of my white and start working that into this area. Again, I'm using the surface.
Hey, Franz, sorry to interrupt again, but it looks like your phone's turned off once more.
I think that, okay, if you hold on for 1 second, I think I need to recharge the battery. It was on 100%. Hold on for a second. There we go.
There we go.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to start lightening the green. And again, as I'm kind of shading this in and moving stuff around, I'm trying to feel the form. All right, so I'm going to put a little bit of blue and then a little yellow. I'm going to start kind of creating my own kind of yellow or bluish green. A little darker in through here. And I want to get the basic shape locked in, and then I can come back and start reclaiming part of that. I put a little white in there. It's a little bit brighter Okay, certainly looks like something. So we're still kind of in stage one. For the pieces that I've been doing, it takes a lot of this kind of give and take, and then erase a little bit, and then add some more. I don't know, how are we doing on time? We have, look at my.
We're almost at 5 o'clock.
Okay, all right. So what I want to do, I mean, I hope that this is kind of giving you some idea. Let's real quick maybe switch to the background for a second. But, you know, it's a matter of building up layers. Sometimes you have to tear them down and then build them up again. I've got the side that I'm using. You use kind of more of a linear approach. And I try not to put my hand down on it. You know, if you got a stick or if you kind of brace this way, you don't have to worry about smearing what you've already done. But I try to go right up until you get on the edge. And then after that, you know, it's not a big. Okay, now when we come over, maybe one of the last things I want to talk about real quickly is this blue paper. You know, obviously if the whole background is going to be kind of blue, it makes sense to start with the blue. But what I'm going to do is leave that fairly bright blue down there, but then I'm going to start using a darker blue for like the wing. I can start from this side, but okay, and it's a little bit not quite that intense down here. So if I put a little bit of white there, it still can have kind of a nice intense blue coming through. Okay, it's a little bit darker as up there. It's a little darker. So you can use that blue to enhance the colors that you're putting on top of it. Up and through here, let's get the tail, because I think that'll really show. In fact, maybe for this, we haven't really been paying too much attention to the oil pastel. Okay, brighten that up a little bit by adding just a touch of the white. Okay, this is where that brush kind of comes in handy. So let's flip those off. All right, now there's kind of a reddish. Got things falling all over the place. Oh, here we go. That's what I'm looking for right here.
Franz, we have a friend asking, what colors would you use for the shading in the white area?
And oh, you up in here?
Yeah.
Through here. It actually is kind of a bluish color. And around here, there's a little bit of a yellow. So maybe to switch gears one more time. right underneath this part, it's just slightly yellow. So I'll put a concentration of that in there, and then I'll kind of fade it out into the white of the paper. And then if I really want the body of the thing to be very bright, let me wipe the, okay, so then I can just go right on top of that yellow with the white, and that's going to kind of blend that a little bit. And so it's pretty much just white all the way across. And even though I could use the paper raw, I kind of like just keeping everything covered. All right, now when we come down to here, you can see there's a little bit of a blue shadow there. And that's a little strong, but I know that when I go over that with the white, I can knock that down a little bit.
Everyone is so grateful for this class, Franz. They've learned so many techniques. Everyone's messaging. They've learned a lot. They're really excited, and they're going to go back and watch this class so they can finish the project.
That's it. That's it. Well, you know, find something that you can relate to. It could be like an abstract thing. It could be expressionistic. It could be a landscape, a still life. My thing has been finding these odd little things, and I like the challenge of trying to make things look like they're shiny or textured. And so in the one thing I didn't mention, I always have a couple little pieces of paper that I test things out, and then what I've learned from there, I'll apply to this. And so it's just a lot of fun working and observing and pushing yourself to try to accomplish whatever it is that you set your goal to be. So I hope that everybody has.
Yeah, and Franz, one quick question. So we had a couple people asking about how to set the artwork once they're finished. And I had mentioned a fixative. You could kind of spray it to kind of help it set. Are there any other tips?
You know what I do? I find that my stuff is so delicate that, and I don't know if it's just because I'm not adept at spray fixing, but I find that a lot of times when, even if I have a brand new can and I'm far enough away, it always alters something. And then you can go back and kind of touch things up. And what I do, as soon as I'm finished with a drawing, I immediately mat it and I don't fix anything. Once it's in a frame, once it's protected, it should, you know, eventually maybe some of the dust particles will filter out or something like that. But I just have not, for the type of work that I'm doing, I haven't found a real good way of fixing it. Sometimes you get a little extra blast of the fixative, and that'll create a very specific pattern. So rather than, you know, maybe 9 times out of 10 that won't happen, but I just don't want to take that chance. And I think they look so nice just the way that they are, that I think that if you put them in a mat, you put them in a frame. I have a soft pastel drawing from 1890 that I never thought about in terms of, oh, don't touch it. And I just put my finger on it. And when I took it off, I noticed that I lifted some off. So here's this drawing that had been around since 1890 until I put my finger on it. It was absolutely perfect. So I think that you just have to, yeah. I mean, that's.
And one more question, Franz.
Yes.
If we have some people asking, if they're a beginner, would you recommend they use oil pastels first or soft pastels for a beginner?
You know, if you could get a small set of both of them and experiment, then, you know, I was convinced when I did the monkey, the left-hand side I did with the oil, and I really liked the way it turned out. And I thought, okay, here are the soft pastels. I hope I can kind of match them up. And I actually ended up enjoying the soft pastels. So I think that, you know, you just have to try both of them and experiment. You know, just get, even if you just buy 2 oil pastels and 2 soft pastels, play with them a little bit and find out which one you feel is going to be a little bit closer to your temperament. That doesn't mean that, you know, once you get some experience with one or the other, you can't switch. But a lot of times it depends on what you're going to use them for. So the type of work that I'm doing, which is very dependent on very smooth blends and almost like a neutral surface. The soft pastels are a little bit better. But when I did that one companion duck to this one, when I used the texture paper, it became a little bit more painterly. And I started thinking, oh, well, that's just a different direction to go. So after I do a couple more of the projects I have planned with the soft pastels, I'm going to go back to the oil pastels and start, seeing about loosening up a little bit. So yeah, it kind of depends on your temperament, what kind of effects you want. But if you're not sure, just buy, a small set of both of them and experiment, and that might give you an idea of what it is that you want to do.
Great. And so everyone, we would love if you showed some of the work you've been working on. And I know Franz will want to check that out too. I see some ducks. I see lots of things. Great.
Oh, look. Wow. Great.
Everyone did a great job.
Yes.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Thank you everyone so much. And remember, this is going to be on michaels.com/classes. So you can go back and watch this and kind of press pause and finish the duck. But this is great. You all did so good. And Franz, we're so grateful for you. Thank you.
My pleasure. I'm trying to spread the word about how exciting pastels are. I've been converted.
Good, good. We love it. Well, thank you. And thank you, everyone. Happy creating.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.